The holiday season is always a special time for gamers. I know for me, growing up, December was pretty much the only month I would ever get new games or consoles, and a lot of the happiest memories of my childhood involved me waking up on Christmas Day, running downstairs so I could scream something like before promptly locking myself in my bedroom for the following 2 weeks. Yeah, I was a fun kid. Well, I'm a lot older now and Christmas is a very different experience compared to what it once was, but I'm still very nostalgic for the holidays, and it's the one time each year that I set aside plenty of time to reconnect with my love of gaming, whether it's catching up with some recent releases or just even revisiting some old favourites. And since it is the season, I thought it would be fun to do a smaller video on something that I always found kind of interesting: seasonal video games. In particular, Christmas themed video games. I have a soft spot for seasonal games, Halloween stuff in particular, although I suppose almost any horror game would suffice as a good Halloween game. But when I say seasonal games, I'm talking about things like Costume Quest, Medieval, or most recently the wonderful Pumpkin Jack. Games that really capture the spirit of the season. Christmas games, on the other hand, well, that's a different story. While Halloween games kinda get a pass for being fun all year round, I'd have a hard time playing a Christmas game when it's not Christmas, and I think that's probably the case for most people too. That's not to say that there hasn't been plenty of Christmas themed releases over the years. In fact, tons of games have Christmas content, it's just you're more likely to see it pop up as a smaller release, an expansion pack, or just as a limited seasonal update for a game. Hell, even Pumpkin Jack just got some Christmas DLC, which probably makes it the king of seasonal games. But what about entire games themed around Christmas? Well, since this is unofficially a PlayStation channel, I thought it would be fun to check out what Christmas games the PlayStation has to offer. So sit down, grab a cup of hot chocolate, put on your red and white bobble hat, and join me for the video game equivalent of a big sack of coal. Now normally I like doing an exhaustive list that covers all the video games in a particular topic, but this is not going to be one of those videos. A big part of this comes down to the fact that not many people have gone to the effort of documenting every Christmas video game, and look, to be fair, I don't really blame them. But there's also really not that many Christmas games on the PlayStation. When I tried to think about it, there was maybe 2 I could think of off the top of my head, so we're going to take a brief look at each of these and see if they're any good. Starting with...
You're a mean one.
First up, we have The Grinch, released in the year 2000 from Konami. Now don't get too excited, Konami are only on publishing duties. The game is actually developed by our old friends from Ass to Mount, Artificial Mind and Movement. I covered one of their later games, Monsters Inc. Scream Team, in a past video, and let's just say, that doesn't instill much confidence regarding the quality of The Grinch here. Now this game came out around the same time as the hit live-action adaptation of The Grinch starring Jim Carrey, so it's more or less a movie tie-in, but it's also kind of its own thing too. The Grinch is a 3D platformer with an emphasis on exploring open levels to complete a variety of different tasks. The setup is very simple. The Grinch is trying to figure out which of his wacky contraptions he's going to use to mess with the unsuspecting townsfolk of Whoville. Of course, the Grinch manages to lose every single one of the blueprints for his devices, which sets him off on an adventure across the land to find the lost blueprints, build some Grinch gadgets, and cause some chaos along the way. A nice, simple platformer setup, and a good excuse for collecting stuff. Now, early into the game, a few things become very clear. One is that the music and voice acting is really well done. The Grinch can sometimes sound a little bit too, not Grinchy at times.
Maybe the octopus climbing device to scale the walls? No.
But the voice cast here are putting in some decent work across the board. And the music especially is punching well above its weight. From what I played of this game, there isn't a bad track to be found. It's a great mixture of upbeat Christmassy tracks, blended in with some more sinister and sneaky themes that really suit the setting and characters. It even has amazing water music, surprisingly. The second thing you might notice is that the game has woeful performance issues. Now normally I'm pretty forgiving with these kind of things. I mean, I play a lot of PS1 games, so I kinda know what I'm getting into. But the Grinch in particular really feels like it could have used a bit more time in the oven. The frame rate chugs quite a bit, and the more open the area, the worse it's going to get, and a lot of this game takes place in wide open areas. There's also a bunch of visual bugs, dodgy hit detection, and some really bad audio mixing and sound glitches too. It's frequent and noticeable enough to be a cut above the usual PlayStation jank, and I was gonna push through it until I came across this section. Now on paper, it's quite simple. I've just got to swing on a pole to reach the platform above. Now plenty of games have pole swinging, hell I've done it a few times in this area already. But for the life of me, I could never make this jump. I tried so many times, trying different timing, different angles, and I could just never ever make it. I thought I was going mad. Do I need an item to make this? Is there really just very specific timing? This is a kid's game. Surely I must be doing something wrong. So, in desperation, I checked the guide, which said it is actually a normal pole jump, but that it also is, and I quote, a difficult maneuver that takes timing and practice. Okay, so I decided then and there that I was gonna make this. This is my ultimate challenge. This simple jump in a children's platformer, it was my destiny to make this jump. And guess what? I couldn't do it. So between the numerous performance issues and whatever the hell this is, I eventually decided to just bail out on the game. But look, I know what you're thinking. This is the coward's way out. I didn't really give the Grinch a fair shot. Maybe this game is amazing and I'm just really stupid. Well, I have a compromise that I think might fix all of my problems. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you our special guest this episode, the king itself, the Grinch for Sega Dreamcast. Okay, so playing a Dreamcast game in a PS1 episode is kind of a cop-out, but this is the same game from the same developer, but just on more powerful hardware. If we were ever going to give the Grinch a fair shot in 2020, this is the way to do it. So immediately off the bat, performance is greatly improved. Everything is smoother, most of the audio and visual glitches are gone, and the audio mixing is noticeably improved as well. It also looks more or less the same as the PS1 version, but with a much cleaner, sharper image. Okay, so all good so far, but what about my mortal enemy? The pole. Oh no. Don't worry, I actually made it on my third try this time around, so yeah, still weird, but just much easier in this game. Okay, so on to the actual game. It's okay. Yeah, so this is very much what you'd expect from a licensed 3D platformer. Complete missions to bother the Who's, find blueprints to unlock gadgets, use gadgets to unlock new areas, and complete more missions that require your new gadgets. Rinse and repeat. You can switch to your canine companion to access smaller areas to help you solve puzzles and collect items, and there's even a nice emphasis on sneaking around with a surprisingly large number of stealth segments, and even some disguises you can collect along the way. How very Metal Gear Solid of you, Mr. Grinch. But overall, nothing here really feels polished enough to make it stand out against any other 3D platformer on the system, especially in the year 2000, and that goes both for the PS1 and the Dreamcast. Combat is pretty janky, platforming, as we already mentioned, is also kinda janky. Plus, the different worlds are fun to explore at first, but you'll spend so much time kinda just aimlessly wandering around looking for tiny things that you may have missed. They do lose their luster pretty quickly. It's certainly a playable game, and there is some fun to be had. In fact, I probably would have loved this game when I was younger, but checking it out for the first time in 2020, yeah, it doesn't really hold up all that well, I'm afraid. That being said, as a Christmas game, this is definitely one of the most Christmassy games around. Lots of presents, snowmen, Christmas trees, lights, snow, lots of snow, and a perfectly fitting Christmassy soundtrack makes this very much feel like a nice Christmas game. So yeah, if you're in the mood for something Christmassy, this is an okay 3D platformer that might help you get into the Christmas mood. Just be aware that the PS1 version is rough to go back to, so the Dreamcast version is probably your best bet. There's also a PC version, but I don't know much about that one. Anyway, let's move on to our next game. Now, you probably have a few questions. Yes, this is real. Yes, this is a PS1 game. Yes, this is a PAL exclusive. And yes, the box art is amazing. Honestly, I don't think there's a way that this game can actually live up to its title screen, but we'll check it out anyway and see how we get on. Surprisingly, the game has CGI cutscenes. Here we see an evil fairy who gets upset that Santa exists, upset enough to teleport him to the fairy's magic world, and now he's trapped here. There you go, that's the plot. So let's get into the game. Level 1, are those bricks? Oh no. Right, now this game isn't so much a Christmas game starring Santa as it is a jank European platformer that happens to star Santa for some reason. And specifically it's Baltic jank, since we have a Lithuanian developer to thank for this one. And yeah, this plays a whole lot like European platformers from the early 90s, which means it involves a lot of exploration, collecting stuff, cheap enemies and platforming, dead ends, and more exploration. But is it good, and more importantly, is it a good Christmassy time? No. And also, no. This game is slow. Your movement is slow, your jumps are slow, your attacks are slow. It's very, very slow. And for a game all about exploration,
that's no good.
Most of the levels you'll just aimlessly wander, exploring high and low, so you can find a key which will unlock you a door, so you can get the next key to unlock another door, and hopefully eventually you will reach a door that moves you to the next level. Outside of the visuals and music, very little changes from level to level. You'll see the same obstacles and the same enemies over and over again. And I mean, what can you say about the visuals? This is a PS1 game that came out in the year 2002. This looks way closer to a Game Boy Advance game than that of an end-life PS1 game. Oh, it was also released on the Game Boy Advance? Okay, that makes a bit more sense. Well, whether it's the Game Boy Advance or the PlayStation 1, Santa Claus Saves the Earth is a pretty ugly looking game. But the worst part is that there's pretty much nothing Christmassy here. Yeah, you get some ice and snow themed stages and there's some Christmassy loading screens, but none of the items, none of the enemies, none of the music, practically nothing in this game makes it Christmassy other than the fact Santa is the star of the game. Like, why does Santa shoot tomatoes? What's going on? Who came up with this? Lithuania, are you okay? Now, I'll be honest, okay, this is a bad game and it's an even worse Christmas game, but for whatever reason, I played this game a little longer than I probably should have, and all things considered, if you think of it as a sort of jank computer port of an ancient European PC game that somehow ended up on the PS1, it's alright, it's functional, and it's just barely entertaining enough to keep you playing. Honestly, there were these weird little details that kept making me want to play more, like the way Santa slides down inclines, these weird clown portraits, the fact that every level has really bad music that if you listen to long enough, it starts sounding low-key kinda good. Plus, whenever you die, it plays music that sounds like a transition in an American sitcom. And best of all, Techno Santa. So yeah, it's trash, but it's also kinda charmingly bad too, which is more than I can say for a lot of games really. So yeah, that's the only two Christmas themed games I could think of on the PlayStation. Kind of a disappointing selection really, but it is what it is. And I'm almost certain there's a third game I'm missing, but nah, it isn't coming to me. To make up for the disappointing selection of Christmas PS1 games on offer, we'll round out the video by looking at something a bit more narrow in scope. Christmas-themed levels in PS1 games. Now this isn't an exhaustive list by any means, but I wanted to highlight two games in particular that always remind me of Christmas. The first is the game James Pond 2 Codename Robocod. This is a British game that was originally released on the Mega Drive and Amiga in 1991. James Pond was oddly popular, at least here in Ireland. People seem to really dig the series. I even remember playing this on my Mega Drive when I was tiny, probably one of the first games I ever played. Well, this is a port that found its way to the PS1 as a PAL exclusive in the year 2003. And it's about a fish that can extend its body vertically, indefinitely. And it also has a parody version of the Robocop team. So you might be wondering, what's Christmassy about this game? And originally I had vague memories of the game featuring a Christmas level. So I thought I would play it again for this episode, capture some quick footage of the level, and my memory was partially correct. Turns out that the game doesn't feature a Christmas level. It turns out that the entire game takes place on the North Pole in Santa's workshop, full of Christmas themed levels and real, honest to God, Christmas music. The box doesn't really give it away, but this is in fact a Christmas game, albeit a port of one from 1991, but it'll do. I didn't spend as much time as I'd like playing through this one, mostly because it's very, very hard, but for a port of a game from 1991, this is still actually quite a lot of fun. It's a pretty simple platformer that once again, since it was made in Europe, features a bunch of non-linear levels, full of dangerous hazards, cheap enemies, and filled with tons of collectibles, some of which are mandatory for progression, so, you know, your mileage with this game may vary. Also, if Santa Save the Earth moved too slow, this is a fine example of the opposite end of the spectrum. But overall, the game looks great, it plays great, the music is great, the stretchy fish gimmick, it's great. Yeah, this is really good. Nice and Christmassy too. Definitely one worth checking out for some holiday gaming. Just expect to probably die a lot as well. Okay, so this last part will in fact just be about a Christmas themed level, but for my money, this is the best Christmas experience one can find on the PS1. And it takes place in Gex Tree, Deep Cover Gecko. Look, a lot can be said about Gex the Gecko.
Hey, speaking of secrets, you want to see my...
Gex.
Believe me, a lot. But the game in the trilogy I spent the most time with was the third entry, Deep Cover Gecko, and if you've been lucky enough to play this before, I bet you remember the game's first world, totally Scrooged. Here we have a full 3D Christmas themed playground to whip some tail in. This game is structured somewhat like Mario 64, with each world housing a number of collectible remotes that can be obtained one at a time in any order you like. Basically this game's version of Stars. And this level features Gex beating up elves on a snowboard, tail whipping ice blocks into statues of yourself, candy cane platforms, presents to smash, a dinosaur you can free from an ice block, my favourite Christmas tradition, and even a boss battle with evil Santa himself. Top it all off with Gex's little snow outfit and some wonderfully festive music, and you've pretty much got yourself the perfect Christmas level. Also, we can't forget Gex's many Christmas voice lines.
I'm gonna find Prancer and Blitzen and ask them why reindeer have such dumb names.
I think the whole game is pretty great, but Totally Scrooge is both a great opening level and one of my favourite Christmas levels in the game, period. It also helps that I got this game for Christmas one year, so there's a deep nostalgic joy attached to both this game and this level around this time of year. So, if you're looking for a new platformer to try over Christmas, make sure you start this one on Christmas Day. Come for the Christmas level and stay, cause you know, it's Gex. So that's it for today's episode. Once again, this isn't an exhaustive list of Christmas themed action on the PS1, but I think we covered a nice chunk of what's available anyway. So if you're looking for some Christmas games, give Gex Tree or James Pond 2 a try. Maybe even the Grinch if you don't have a Dreamcast and think you can put up with the performance problems. And also if you have the basic human competency to make a single jump in a kid's game. I swear, I'll see this in my nightmares for years to come. But for now, I'd like to thank you all for joining me for today's seasonal themed episode. I hope you have a very happy holiday no matter what or how you celebrate. Remember to treat yourself and be kind to yourself. I'll see you next year for some more amateurish video game content. But most importantly, don't forget, Die Hard Trilogy is actually the best PS1 Christmas game. It was Die Hard Trilogy all along, I'm sorry.